Hello and welcome to Haman Nature. I am Adam Haman. This is a crossover episode with the great Bob Murphy, and we are talking about nukes. Or rather, we're talking about nuclear power. This country, the United States, was at the forefront of nuclear power and going gangbusters, and then all of a sudden, we stopped. So why was that? Should it have happened? Should we reverse course? What are the pros and cons? We get into all of that in a very interesting way on this episode. Enjoy. Hi, Bob.
Hey, Adam.
Today, Bob, I'm very scared about nuclear power plants. I am scared we don't have nearly enough of them.
I share your concern, your fear even, and you sent me an intriguing video. It was, I think, 18 minutes long, and you thought, hey, could this be fodder for an episode? And my initial reaction, I didn't look at it yet, and I thought, how could 18 minutes? And you said, oh, it's dense. It is as energy dense as coal. And so, we're just going to go through some clips. I want to be clear at the outset, folks, we are not endorsing everything in this. This is just discussion, just like we certainly didn't endorse everything that Peter Thiel or others say when we go through our clips.
Yes, very good point. These are just launching off points for erudite discussion, we hope. Mm-hmm. And yeah, this is from a YouTube account called Maxinomics, and he titled it, "They're Lying to You About Nuclear."
Yeah. Before we jump in, I should probably address the elephant in the room for those who have been longtime listeners. As you know, Adam, Tom Woods and I had a cruise tied to our quite beloved podcast, and the Contra Crewman, and we were going to have a roast of Dave Smith. And anyway, things, I'm trying to remember exactly. I know what it was. No, Tom had his extravaganza in Florida, and originally I was going to go, because we were doing roast, we were going to do roast on the cruise, and then that one got canceled because of COVID. But anyway, there was another one that Tom was going to have, when he would have the celebrations of his, 60 billionth podcast in the Tom episode of the Tom Woods Show. And so one of them, there was going to be a roast. I don't know if it was a roast of Tom. Probably that would make sense. And, Dave Smith is going to be, a lot of people are going to be there. And I was supposed to go the original one, and then there was a hurricane. He had to postpone it, and I couldn't make the new date. All right, so I had prepared a bunch of material to roast Dave and Tom, and I think Malice was going to be there and some people. So I had some stuff. It was pretty good. And then I couldn't go. So Tom gets up. I'm not even there, and roasts me in absentia. Is that a term? Is that what they would have said in the Latin? Besides, low dog, you dog, you dirty dog. So anyway, one of the things that Tom brought up was apparently on Contra Krugman, I used to say nuclear without even being aware of that. And anyway, that was Tom's. He said, Bob, the word is nuclear. So ever since that was pointed out to me that I was George W. Bush in it, but just said, oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't even, I said, do you guys pronounce it February? I don't think so. I have never, to my knowledge, said nuclear ever again. And yet people will still, in the comments, even when I'm clearly saying a nuclear, accuse me of nuclear. See? So, anyway, I just want to be clear that I'm going to be so careful this episode to watch, like I'm visualizing my tongue moving in my mouth as I speak.
Yeah, some things you just can't get away from. Like, no matter how old Douglas Murray gets, he's going to get what you've never been. It's just going to happen.
Yes.
So, we forgive you. All right, so shall we
Can I say one last
stage?
thing? I'm sorry, since I hijacked this, is I trickled out some of my material, because again, the shame was I had all this stuff, and it was the kind of thing too where I had some stuff that was just, right down the middle, like easy peasy, there's no way this joke won't work. Other stuff, it was like, if the crowd's really with me and I got them, I'm going to risk and do these, things. Not because the jokes were risque, but like, it involved me doing something that like I really had to be in the zone to pull it off kind of thing. And I, amongst my daydreams, besides, having a lot of Bitcoins and things like that, is I want to get to a place, Adam, where I'm in front of a live audience and I bring up this story and then I say, would you folks like to hear what I would have said to Tom and Malice and Dave Smith? And they're going to, I think the crowd would be into it, and then I will go ahead and tell them, and then they will be quite entertained.
If you wanted to entertain me and only me, you'll do that whole thing, that whole setup. And then when they say yes, you reach down to a briefcase and pull out a ventriloquist dummy and then proceed to bomb really, really hard.
I like I've heard stories about that. It's a very good premise. Like, I understand why he thought that would work. And anyway, okay.
All right, let's start talking about nuclear power. The United States in the 60s used to be on pace to being a great nuclear power nation, and then we turned in a different direction. And so this video is all about why did that happen? Let's start.
Still running today. This nuclear plant was turned on in 1969, the absolute heyday of nuclear power in the U.S. 3 new nuclear reactors were being turned on every year, each flip of the switch sending power to 500,000 homes. But it wasn't just the number of reactors being turned on in a year, it was how fast each one was being built. 5 years from breaking ground to turning it on, giving millions of people the benefit from one of the most profound and steady links in the entire field of economics. The more energy a country uses, the better off its people are. And the U.S. just stopped, but it was years before this.
It was an accident at the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant. The nation and much of the world has been watching as this nuclear nightmare unfolds.
Chaos and confusion reigned as monitors tried to determine exactly how much radiation was released.
It started more than a decade before Chernobyl. So really what happened? Suddenly, plants that announced construction in the 70s started being delayed 9, 12, 20 years. Only 4 have been built in the U.S. since 1996. This, what really hasn't been well explained before, is exactly what happened.
All right. Very exciting.
Yeah, so I liked just that opening, firstly, to convey to the viewers, what kind of stuff this is. And by the way, folks, it was a jam-packed 18 minutes. No matter what clips we showed, we were leaving out a lot of cool stuff. So I encourage you, if you're intrigued, go watch the video. We're only going to be able to touch on some of the highlights, and maybe you and I, Adam, will allude to other things that we don't have clips for. But I really like just him showing the contrast, like the pace of development and how much they were throwing those things up, and then bam, it kind of fell off a cliff. And we never talk about that now. It used to be a thing, and now that's just like people don't even discuss that anymore. When we're talking about the different, it's coal, natural gas, whatever, all the arguments about climate change. People barely talk about nuclear. And yet, the guy gets in this later, but it's like the zero emission, according to their own logic, like that should be front and center. And then I also liked in that where he anticipates, I'm sure if you asked most Americans what happened, they would say, oh, well, because of all those, the 3 Mile Island, most famously in terms of the United States. And then, wasn't there stuff in Chernobyl and then more recently the Fukushima? So clearly that must have been what happened, right? That there was that disaster, and then I don't know, probably a bunch of people died or something, and then they slammed the brakes, right? And as he's saying, no, that's the rapid deceleration of construction happened before those alleged disasters, and we'll get into that stuff more.
Yeah, precisely. From my perspective, it was a mix of real events that were bad, but then just compounded upon by scores and scores and scores of TV shows and movies in which the horrors of radioactivity and nuclear power were just demonstrated over and over in fiction and film. And we're going to get into that. This next clip asks the question, how dangerous are these radioactive materials?
You pour it out in the hand, and that's radioactive contamination. Very radioactive. That material that I just ate is not soluble in body fluids.
He actually did eat uranium. You can and live to tell about it, apparently. And it wasn't just him. The scientists and researchers at Los Alamos carried mounds of plutonium around in their lab coat pockets during the Manhattan Project.
Here it is, General Groves, plutonium.
The plutonium that went into the first plutonium bomb was driven 220 miles to Los Alamos in a basic Army truck. Zero protective anything. These were the brightest scientists in the world. They were not reckless people, and they all died in old age of natural causes.
All except John Cusack, of course.
Right. So there, and what Adam's referring to is, I mean, I think I even went to Bing and not just Google because I was really wanting to be thorough on this one, and just said, did any of the Los Alamos scientists die of radiation poisoning? And yeah, there were two, and it wasn't like, oh yeah, well, they died statistically a few years ahead of time when you would have thought from lung cancer. No, I mean they died like
right away
within days or weeks after having a heavy exposure. Two of them did, and it was John. I know I had seen a movie. What's funny, Adam, that's why what I'm trying to get across, folks, is this guy, he's got a lot of cool stuff in here, but some of his claims are a little bit too strident, maybe, sweeping.
Bit, yeah.
That there, you would think literally no one died, but no, there two did. And at first I thought, Adam, like, oh, I guess that was just some crazy Hollywood thing that I saw. And like, no, that guy really did die, and John Cusack portrayed him.
I just hate it when my natural go-to reference for truth of fictional movies in Hollywood don't tell me exactly what actually happened. But John Cusack's character, Michael Merriman, from Fat Man and Little Boy, the story of the building of the two nukes that the United States dropped on Japan, he's actually a fictional composite of two scientists named Harry Dalian and Louis Slotin. And in Fat Man and Little Boy, they're trying to take measurements of the plutonium core before they drop the bombs. And he's doing it sort of, jury-rigged with a screwdriver and, trying to figure out, how close you can get the two elements before a critical mass ensues. And when you look into it, both of these guys got exposed in research that was done after both bombs were dropped on Japan, as they continued to work on building more and bigger bombs. So I'm dismayed. I've been lied to once again by Hollywood, Bob. I'm crestfallen.
Okay. Another interesting thing is I kind of remembered that I thought Richard Feynman died of cancer, and I confirmed. I went and looked up, and in 1978, Feynman sought medical treatment for abdominal pains and was diagnosed with liposarcoma, a rare form of cancer. Surgeons removed a very large tumor that had crushed one kidney and and all right. And so I don't know that dying from a rare form of cancer you could describe as dying from natural causes, and so clearly his work on the Manhattan Project had nothing to do with it. So I'm just saying, when this guy says, oh, they all died from natural causes, which could include a rare form of cancer. So I don't know.
I don't suppose when they cut that big tumor open, in the middle of it were a bunch of little pellets of uranium that these lunatics are eating like Tic Tacs or something.
So anyway, what's also funny too is, even on its own terms, that guy that was I'm going to eat this, and then, for all we know, that guy dropped dead 2 days later, and they were like, yes, he was a convicted criminal, and the nuclear industry paid him a lot to do that stunt, and his family thanks him every day.
I don't think there's any financial reward I could have tied up in anything uranium related that would make me eat uranium. Like, on the one hand, I'm sure our fears are probably, overhyped. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, it's the kind of thing where you'd kind of want your fears to be a little overhyped in that direction, right? Rather than the other way.
Right.
If you're going to be off calibrated. Yeah. And similarly.
So anyway, I think we should probably, like, we kind of are joking around. So I think, though, that is worth showing. Like, perhaps this guy swung the pendulum too far the other way by making it sound like, yeah, what are you talking about? You can eat this stuff. And
I got some right here, Bob.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Let me take out a life insurance policy on you at least. But yeah, we're kind of poking fun that he went too far. But on the other hand, yeah, it is like that. An anecdote is, when I went and researched, I think I might have talked about this with you on this very crossover genre. I can't remember. I wrote a novel, Minerva, in grad school, and part of what happens in there is the U.S. government, once again, as it is wont to do, drops a nuclear device on one of its enemies. And when I was doing research, just kind of background, just to get a sense of how bad would that be, because now obviously the the bombs they use, folks, like for one thing, they switched to hydrogen. It was that's what we call the hydrogen bomb instead of the atomic bomb. That it's the difference between fission and fusion. But the ones they develop now are just so many orders of magnitude more powerful than what they dropped on Japan back in World War II. And I kind of just thought, though, it was like, oh yeah, everything gets melted, and it's not that bad, right? Like if they dropped one in Manhattan, like a lot of people would die, but it's not like all of New York City would just be vaporized or something. Which I saw some other movie. Again, I'm sorry, Adam, that Hollywood does not do a good job. I forget what movie it was, but it was like some kid was talking. It might have had Christopher Walken in it. Like, now I'm picturing it, but explaining to the kid that if your daddy was there and this, and it was like, I'm a little kid watching this movie, and that's what I just filed away as, oh, that's what would happen if you dropped a nuke on some modern city. And no, that's not what would happen. Again, it wouldn't be cool, but it wouldn't be as bad. I'm saying, like when I was watching YouTube videos of like what would happen if they dropped one at the center, in Times Square, and it was like buildings 8 blocks away would be pulverized. And okay, but that's so if you're 10 blocks away, the building would be standing and just you would die. But so it was kind of limiting. And then it was like, and as long depending on the rains and the wind, it could be bad, but it might not so be bad if the wind's blowing the right way and brings it out to the ocean. So anyway.
Breaking news, Bob Murphy says nuking Manhattan equals not that bad. All right, well, here's another area where our intuitions are probably miscalibrated, not just about radioactive elements themselves, but radiation in itself. Let's see what the man has to say.
And we can all kind of feel that, right? Like you go to the dentist, get an x-ray, they put that heavy vest on you, like, oh, this is kind of serious. Dentist leaves the room, closes the door, click. What bombarded your body in that moment was the same amount of radiation that hits your body every single day. It's everywhere. Radiation is impossible to escape. Hitting you right now, coming from the sun and the ground, and in some places where people spend a lot of time, there's way more of it. It is a long 3-month radiation-soaked journey to climb Mount Everest. Once your flight has touched down in Kathmandu, you've made the 2-week trek to base camp, spend 7 weeks getting used to the altitude, getting to the summit, getting back to Kathmandu, and taking a plane back home. A climber has absorbed 3 years worth of radiation that someone at normal sea level altitude will absorb. The more atmosphere between you and the sun, the less radiation gets through and hits you. For every 5,000 feet above sea level, your radiation exposure doubles. Yet, mountaineers, like those that climb Everest, and the Sherpas or guides that basically live at Everest Base Camp 3 or 4 months of the year, don't have a higher risk of cancer or live shorter lives. People that live in Denver, a mile above sea level, have some of the lowest rates of cancer in the US. And that is because the human body has figured out how to live bathed in radiation. You have nerves in your fingers to tell you to stop touching something if it's hot, right? Stop, or that's going to become a problem. But because it's impossible to avoid radiation, your body evolved ways to live with it. Over the course of 10 days, you pick up about 0.2 units of background radiation. At Everest Base Camp, it's 2.5. The 80,000 residents closest to Fukushima after the meltdown, 10 to 50. The workers at Fukushima, 250. What has not been widely reported, because it is kind of a boring headline, there has been no rise in cancer, death, sickness, nothing from Fukushima. Zero. Study after study has shown no effects from the radiation leak.
That there have been no adverse health effects documented.
Still today, only 50 sure deaths have been recorded from Chernobyl. 2/3 of those came from the firefighters or the operators on site that were often exposed directly to within feet of the reactor core. There has been a significant increase in thyroid cancer from Chernobyl, which sounds scary, but it is a cancer that's easily handled and usually carries no symptoms. The thyroid cancers from Chernobyl have not led to a significant loss of life years. These circles represent all the deaths from different energy sources between 1969 and 2000. Coal, oil, hydro, dams do break occasionally, natural gas, nuclear. Way too big. Nuclear. Wind? Solar. And what really slowed things here in the US, 3 Mile Island, exactly 0 fatalities, no health impact at all. It was benign.
So I have 2 immediate thoughts. First is the next time the dental technician hands me that lead vest to wear when I'm getting my x-rays, I'm just going to throw it right back at her and What do you think? I'm some kind of coward? Stupid. Get this away from me. And the other one was, for people who aren't watching this on video, this guy was drawing these chalk circles on a chalkboard showing the number of deaths related to various forms of energy, and coal and hydro, and they were huge. The nuclear was tiny, but I thought that was extremely dishonest pictorially, because those are just total deaths. But of course, way more, kilowatt hours have been produced from fossil fuels than anything else. So what you'd want to see is the amount of casualties per kilowatt hour. And I looked up, the Lancet had an estimation just from coal versus nuclear. It said coal caused 10,000 deaths per trillion kilowatt hours produced, while nuclear causes fewer than 100. And I'm not going to stand by, how they generated those numbers, but it's better than this guy's chalk circles that were, obviously not quite telling you an accurate story.
Great point. I didn't even think of that particular element, but you're right.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, no, that's great. I suppose, in fairness, the guy, it's funny. It comes off now that we're just trashing this video. Like, hey, folks, when it was the other way around, I really thought it was a fascinating video. And then
we're going to put links to the video, and I encourage that you click on them. It's only 18 minutes, and it is good.
I guess I'm just clarifying for the audience that Adam and I were not thinking, let's go in and spike this thing. It was, I thought, hey, let's just not come off like we're saying this thing is completely unvarnished truth. I suppose, in fairness, the guy could say those numbers, it's being driven by a few random, commies don't know how to run their plant, and then the Fukushima thing was like a tsunami hit. Like, there was a bunch of stuff that went wrong with that one, where it was kind of a crazy event. And so maybe it's if we had 10 times as many plants operating, the total death toll would not have gone up significantly, and yet you would have had 10 times more kilowatt hours in the denominator. Just a little bit, I know you know this, Adam, but to explain to people, because I've heard people say that, like stand-up comedians and stuff will say, you ever notice when you go to the dentist and they put, they're going to give you that thing and, it's safe, I'm going to get that radiation zapped into your brain, and is it safe? Oh, yeah. And then after the technician assures me that she leaves the room, right? That's a good laugh line, right? If it's so safe. But of course, the explanation, and then also, why are you putting the thing? But obviously the explanation, it's a matter of degree, right? That,
of course.
And it's given that they need to look at your teeth, they can't block your face, but there's no reason that your whole chest and everything has to get hit with it too. And it's cumulative. And then also that explains why the technicians, that it's fine for you to go in every 6 months or a year or whatever and get a checkup, and then you got a pain that they take an x-ray, but the person whose job it is to administer that, she can't be sitting there sucking that in 8 hours a day. That's not, safe.
I mean, and even if she would be fine, in most cases, like, why would you take the risk? You just don't have to.
I don't know if you do that, but like, if a lot of times I'm reheating coffee in the microwave, and I just kind of like watching the mug spin around, and I realize at some point, like, I don't need my face to be this. I'm just going to take a step back. Like, if I double the distance between my face and the microwave, then I'm cutting, by 75%. And it might be 75% of a low number.
That's really interesting. I do the opposite. I lean my cheek up against it, and I sort of look at it like I'm looking out of an aquarium.
Is that why you have that big bump?
Yeah, that's where I get that. And it moves around. I don't know what that's all about.
So there is that. And I've heard things too, like, but again, with all this stuff, it's relative, that people, that sounds scary, and maybe they should pass laws, or they should have that. But I believe, airline attendants, what used to be called stewardesses, I think they get more radiation than the people working in the dentist's office.
Oh, yeah.
Because again, they're up in the air so much. So anyway, with all this stuff, whereas people don't think like that. So with all these things, and how did you feel? The Denver one, I don't know about it as much, but like the mountain climbers, I could kind of attribute that to those people are so robust that they probably would outperform. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's like saying Superman doesn't die of cancer.
It's a population of very healthy people, and they're obviously more susceptible to dying from gravity than they are cancer.
Yeah.
And about the Denver thing, I mean, I'm from there. they certainly don't teach people to worry about anything about radiation because you're up so high. I mean, it's not a subject of concern.
Well, right. But I'm trying to say, is it just like for him to say, hey, if radiation was bad for your body, you'd expect all these mountain climbers to be sickly. And I want to say, well, they're mountain climbers, so maybe that's kind of compensated. With the Denver thing, though, is it, just like, oh, yeah, you're the kind of person that moves to Denver. I mean, you're really robust. And so that could explain. You get what I'm saying?
I do. There's a lot of fat people in Denver, but I get what you mean. Yeah, there's another issue I want to tackle related to this, but it's going to come up more when it comes to the regulation. So let's wait until the next one. So with this clip, between the costs of nuclear reactor construction and all these regulatory hurdles, why in the world would anyone build one?
But what does it actually cost a major nuclear project to be delayed, let's say, 1 month? The U.S. Congressional Budget Office says $44 million. There are countless stories of construction crews finishing a part of a plant only to have to completely rip it out a few weeks later and rebuild the same thing, just in a slightly different way after a new rule came in. About one rule or standard was being created every day between 1973 and 1978. Think about that. You designed and planned your reactor in 1971. By 1978, all these new requirements had to be satisfied. These plants all began construction between 1972 and 1975. Shoreham in New York, 12-year delay, canceled. Midland in Michigan, 13-year delay, canceled. Sequoia in Tennessee, 8-year delay. Comanche Peak in Texas, 10 years. Seabrook in New Hampshire, 14 years. The utility went bankrupt, the first utility bankruptcy since the Great Depression.
We're here to review the licensing and whether the Seabrook plant received its full power license on March 1st after 17 years of delay. And those delays in Seabrook have been staggering.
Regime uncertainty, Dr. Robert Higgs talked about.
Yep, that it's again, folks, it's not just what Higgs was talking about was in the 1930s and the New Deal and trying to explain, I don't have the figures handy, but business investment in the private sector was just atrocious. And that was, one of the key metrics, and that's what Higgs pointed to try to understand why was the U.S. just mired in a deep depression basically for the whole decade. There were ups and downs, but and that was one of his points. And just looking back, you could try to assess and say, well, the New Deal things were bad and they cartelized the industries and they did this and then taxes did this and but in the grand scheme, and the point was that's not enough. That in 1936, business people did not know what the rules were going to be in 37 and 38 and 39. They didn't know how bad it was going to be. And so that's part of the issue. So yeah, you're not going to commit to that. And then I don't know if it was in that clip, but he also went on to say, Adam, that, once 10 years go by and there's very little construction, then a lot of the skills atrophy and things. And, it's you can't just, even if things get clarified and interest rates go down, you can't just jump right back into it if you already missed a decade.
Yeah, all the skilled laborers and technicians and architects or whoever you need. It's not like you can just drive up to the Home Depot and have a bunch of nuclear scientists get in the back of your pickup and go build a nuclear reactor.
Didn't that happen in Back to the Future?
Yeah, I think it probably did.
Well, they were getting plutonium that way, yeah.
We didn't play this part, but he was going over just all the regulations that were just piled on and piled on. And it seemed like a bunch of legislators just making stuff up. Like, did you catch the... They called it the linear no threshold model, where they just literally add it up in linear fashion, that each exposure just gives you that much a % chance of getting cancer or whatever, without taking into consideration, I don't know, like the time between exposures or cellular regeneration or anything, or whether that model just even makes sense, biologically. I just thought that was weird, like some Frankenstein scientific creation, of a legislature. And that was only one of them. It looked like they're just giving any activist who didn't want to see a nuclear reactor built just a quiver of arrows with which they could knock down these projects. And you just expect those things to be not scientific.
Right. I even think it was worse than what you just said, because they're, you're sort of getting at, which I think is true, that they were saying, like, once you get the exposure, it's not like it gets flushed out of your system or something. It's like, boom, that you had it, and then it's just a cumulative thing, which I'm pretty sure they still do. Like people working in hazmat suits and things like that. It's like they keep track of it, and like, oh no, you're done. Like for the year, you can't work anymore. And then once you hit a certain thing, like you got to retire, you got to go do something else. You're not allowed to continue doing that. And again, the spacing of it doesn't matter. It's not like, oh yeah, I got to take a 6-month break and come back. It's not like that, the way they do it. But I think the linear thing in particular, Adam, unless I misunderstood, it was even more naive, I guess, or simplistic, where it was, oh, if this exposure would increase your chance of cancer by 1%, then every time you get that same exposure, it increases the percentage by another percentage point.
Yeah.
Which, clearly it was like that.
That can't be right.
Right, which is that guy there was that funny, did you see the thing that was viral? Is it Huberman? He had something about, I won't get into it because I'm not going to get it right, but he did something like that where he was matter-of-factly talking about some, health technique that he used, and he was kind of doing the same kind of logic where you would have more than 100% chance of something happening, and it was like he didn't catch himself.
That can't be right.
Yeah. So yeah, there's all that stuff mixed in there. You know where you won't see crazy economics?
Do tell.
If you wanted to promote your business, you got some kind of church festival coming up, and you thought, instead of me just telling people about, or not even so much promoting it, but once the people get there, just to have them get something, you want to give them some kind of gift of appreciation, something to commemorate the event, and you don't know what. You could have it T-shirts, mugs, ball caps,
hoodies.
Do you know why people
wouldn't
would
it be
go
great
for such a thing?
Yeah, wouldn't it be great if there's a company that could provide that and walk you through the whole process? You don't even have to know anything about it.
I would want to know that the guys were all together. That maybe,
like a family?
Yes, yeah.
And related in some fashion to waterfowl? Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about the Swan Brothers, your go-to company for all things merch and swag related. Bob, I was talking to a guy who knew he kind of needed merch to promote his brand and to celebrate these sorts of events, get the word out, fundraise. But he did it all wrong. He ordered a bunch of stuff ahead of time and then just tried to move it at the event. And he ended up just sitting with, his second bedroom just filled with boxes full of gear he couldn't get rid of because he didn't know what he was doing. If only he had a partner like the Swan Brothers.
Actually, why don't you elaborate on that? Because people aren't going to understand. How did the Swan Brothers alleviate that problem?
You will sell all your items and have them delivered. The point being, you don't have to manage the inventory through them. They handle that. It's
right. You can set up like an online store, as it were, for your event or whatever. And then, like, for example, if your company is going to have a get together, maybe people work remotely, and they're all going to fly in and do something. You can set the store up on a website dedicated to your event, and then you can tell the employees, like, here's your budget, or the company can do it or whatever, and they can place their orders. And so it's all, you're decentralizing it. Like Adam says, you don't have to just say, yeah, I got to just guess. Yeah, give me 60 XLs and give me 30, larges and da-da-da, and let's hope I don't get stuck holding this stuff. Like, you can take the guesswork out of it if that's the way you want to go.
Precisely. So what is the URL in question?
theswanbrothers.com/cross, and that's because of these crossover episodes. They're our sponsor for these things. So it's the SWAN, theswanbrothers.com/cross.
Very nice, Bob, and we encourage everybody to go visit them. Even if you're not sure that you need such a thing, just go put your information in. Somebody will call you back and walk you through all the different ways they can help you.
So what I liked about that clip, though, that we just listened to, among other things, and when I grabbed that one, is just to show the magnitude of just even delaying by a month and just how much that racks up the cost. And I think people don't appreciate. I mean, until, folks, you're in business, not that I'm, a tycoon or anything, but I mean, just something as simple as like putting on an event at a hotel. Do you people have any idea how much they charge you just to have coffee for the coffee breaks? You would be astonished at how much they charge, based on the crowd size and everything. So I can't even imagine trying to raise money from investors to build a nuclear power plant in the United States. Just like what a risky venture that would be, knowing you could be just about to do it, and then some environmentalist group, could file a lawsuit, and you say, oh, well, that just, you just got to wait and hire some lawyers to fight that, and you could clear it up in 6 months. Do you know how much you just lost? Just opportunity cost wise and everything. I mean, it's just, which is why we have those statistics that he talked about in the first opening segment.
Yeah, precisely. We really need a change in national consciousness, which I think is underway. And one of the exciting technological features that's going to drive that, I think, is these small modular reactors that he is about to discuss right now.
Ultimately, again, it boils down to the fear. We can all feel it. Maybe it was the Simpsons' fault.
Yeah, well, it's always been like that.
Maybe it was the use and testing of atomic weapons and the imagery around all of that. Maybe it was the nuclear industry's fault, insisting that nuclear is fail-safe, nothing would ever go wrong, and then things went wrong at a bunch of nuclear plants. What else are you lying about? Perhaps smaller is the key, because when a nuclear submarine smashes up through Arctic ice, the nuclear reactor that powers it is fine. In service for over 70 years, there has never been a problem, let alone a meltdown on a nuclear-powered submarine or aircraft carrier. And we're not just talking a handful of these things. More than 200, traveling millions of miles around the globe, all fitted with a nuclear reactor that produces about 8% of the power the newest reactor in the US we looked at earlier does. Going up and down in the ocean, fast, slow, vertical, horizontal, these are a critical part of the nuclear defense system. They have to work. This, basically a nuclear submarine engine, is what they're talking about if you've heard the term Small Modular Reactor, or SMR.
Yeah, I blame it all on Blinky, that damn fish.
All right, so I certainly like that. I thought that was rhetorically very effective.
Yes.
I'd like to point out that this is not just a few things in cities, and we don't have a big sample size, that people can vaguely remember that, in case people don't know, like that the nuclear subs that we have, it's not merely that they have warheads on them. And by the way, just in case people don't know, like that's a critical part of the U.S.'s ability, like to survive a first strike by the Soviets, well, by the Russians now or whoever, right? That the idea was, even if they just completely catch us by surprise and hit all of our land-based targets and hit our airfields and whatever, we still have at any given time lots of submarines out there on patrol. They just keep rotating, and and they can stay deployed for a long time, and they will just come up and shoot their missiles, and what the Russians are going to do, right? So, and that those things themselves are powered by a small reactor, and like the guy's saying, you never hear about that. So I have some things to say on that, but I don't know. Do you want to react to that segment first?
The guy in the video was talking about psychology a bunch, and these things kind of solve one of those psychological hurdles. Rather than build one of those big 1,000 megawatt or 1,500 megawatt Springfield Mr. Burns style nuclear power plants, you build these little ones, 100 to 400 megawatts, and they come out of a factory, so they're all pre-made modular rather than bespoke, which means that they'll be so much cheaper. If there's any problems with them, you'll be able to swap out parts super easy. And they're so dynamic and flexible, their use cases become so much more numerous and powerful because it's not just tied to one spot. You could put them anywhere and add them as you go. And again, I think it's kind of a big deal that they won't look like the things you're scared of, those 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl style nuclear reactors. They're built better now. They don't have any of the, the first few were pretty safe, all things considered, and these are way safer. So I have high hopes for the things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I was, I assessed what he thought, and I thought he's right. It's not that you ever hear about, like, oh yeah, I remember the time that one of our subs blew up or something, and then it was really awkward, and we had to, and I suppose in fairness you could say, well, maybe they would have buried that happened if it did happen. But it occurred to me, okay, but isn't it possible that there's a bunch of sailors who get cancer 20 years from now, right? So it seems like there's a kind of a little, I don't know, him kind of glossing over things. Like even with Chernobyl, when he said that, I was surprised, and I went and looked it up, and he's right that in terms of like how many people just clearly, boom, died right from that happening, it's like 50. But then the issue is, okay, you need to look and see in the surrounding area, did more people die from cancer or whatever that, sooner than you would have expected? And then there it's tricky too, because, well, maybe the information we're getting in the Soviets wanted to bury that, so there's stuff like that that's tricky. And so anyway, so this maybe it'd be of interest to some, is kind of funny. So I went to try to go find and see, is there, and I went to Bing again, because Bing's better than Google for such a thing, to see, are there, is there a higher rate of cancer among sailors who work on, these nuclear subs? And the paper that popped up that was, clearly the one that everybody was citing and everything was published in 2020, I believe. It was by Christopher Busby. High cancer risk in U.S. Navy personnel serving in nuclear-powered ships. And here's the abstract. The USA Defense Threat Reduction Agency provided data in 2014 on the health status, including cancer, of the 4,843 sailors on the nuclear-powered United States ship USS Ronald Reagan over the 2.5-year period from May 2011 through December 2013. Also provided were data on a matched control group of 65,000 blah, 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 U.S. Navy personnel. Examination of the control population relative to the U.S. national data gives a relative risk for all malignancies of 9.2. The results suggest a significant cancer risk associated with serving on a nuclear-powered ship, one which is not predicted by the science underlying current radiation protection legislation. Okay, so let me just explain what happened there, because at first that abstract didn't make. It was like the control group was the other Navy personnel, and then they were looking at but the abstract didn't talk about that. It just went right to comparing the control groups, and I was like, what the hell? So here's what happened, because I was Googling around. I think I actually Googled around to find the broader story, and this is what happened. By the way, I was like, how big are these submarines? The USS Ronald Reagan.
That's an aircraft carrier.
Right? Yeah, it was like the head of one of the fleets or something. It was like the flagship. So that's why. Because also they had like 2,500 aircraft personnel.
Yeah.
Right. So that ship holds like 7,000 people. So not into a little submarine. That wouldn't work. So anyway, what happened was, and also part of the story is I was looking around for that. And then I saw that there had been reports of a lot of people getting sick who served on the USS Ronald Reagan, and they were claiming it's because they sent us in as a rescue operation when Fukushima, I know I keep mispronouncing that, happened. And so I thought, maybe it was because of that, and not because they're working on an aircraft carrier that's got a reactor on it, right? And then I went and checked the timeline to see, wait a minute, when was this? Because the study, I think, was 2020. But I thought, well, and the timeline was perfect. Like in terms of when that scientific study, was looking at the dates in question, it lined up exactly when that thing happened. And I was like, that's kind of, because here's what happened. Here's the backstory. So after, that disaster happens in Japan, and the USS Ronald Reagan, I guess, among other ships, gets sent in on rescue. And apparently the sailors were not informed as to, here's why we're going in there. Like they learned that while they were there, like the radiation things are going off the charts and what the heck's going on. So they do the thing, and then apparently some guys were, getting woozy and whatever, and then, complaining afterward. And so the Navy, to show that, and what I'm saying now is coming from the guy whose study that was. All right. And then this thing was like in Counterpunch, which is like a very lefty, anti-establishment outlet. And so, maybe this guy has an ideological axe to grind. But anyway, this is the story, and it's consistent with the stuff. And that is a peer-reviewed study that I just was quoting from. That wasn't, just something that was on wehatecapitalism.org. And so the way he tells the story is what happened was the U.S. Navy, in order to demonstrate and say, no, the sailors who were on the USS Ronald Reagan and went in right after this disaster in Japan, here's, the data on their cancer rates, and here's the control group, and we'll just show you, just to show we're doing apples to apples. And probably they did this to try to get the result they wanted. they didn't just give them the whole Navy. They only gave them Navy personnel who were on the nuclear fleet, right? Like on subs or aircraft carriers that had reactors. And so they were trying to show, and it was true that the rate of cancer among, the Ronald Reagan people was not higher. In fact, was actually turned out to be lower than the rest of them. Okay. And so the Navy said, see? And so then this guy, though, said, oh, you idiots, you just gave us all that data. And he didn't look at what was the rate of cancer among the sailors serving on the USS Ronald Reagan versus the other nuclear-powered ships. He just looked at the broad population of sailors on the nuclear-powered ships compared to the general population, and that was apparently 9.2 times higher. Not percentage points, like a factor. The rate, and the absolute number, I don't even know what it was, so maybe it wasn't that big. But the point is, whatever the rate of cancer was on the general population, it was 9.2 times higher among the people serving on the thing. So his deal was, you screwed up, AA Iran, and you shouldn't have given us that information. So, and one last little thing, I was wondering, well, that's kind of weird that why would the Reagan, so maybe it was because the Fukushima thing didn't do much, and maybe it's better to be serving on a humongous aircraft carrier where most of the people are not like in proximity to this thing, whereas in a sub, you're kind of, next to the reactor the whole time you're on it. So anyway, that's what my results popped out of that. And so it's consistent, right? Like,
did you happen to get the cancer rates of Navy personnel not on nuclear ships?
I did not. No.
Because, sailors on ships of war are probably around a whole bunch of stuff that might be carcinogenic, right?
Oh, it's interesting you say that, because in one of the other threads where I was I'm just looking around at this stuff, and then, somebody posted a link to that, and all these guys are chiming in like, oh yeah, I served on the blah, 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 and this year, and a lot of them were saying, yeah, my lawyer told me it might be because of asbestos, and I've got a claim with the veterans. So, it kind of is like, yeah, the Navy gave him cancer, all right, but it wasn't because of the reactors. Right. It was because of this other crap,
I'm thinking of munitions and, I don't know, all the other lubricants and whatever, however you make all those huge piles of metal work.
But, so anyway, I'm just saying it was just kind of funny, because to me, I thought that I was like, oh, these idiots, don't they know that was right when the Fukushima, and then, like, that was the whole point. That was why the data was released. But, yeah, that occurred to me too. But even on its own terms, again, we're trying to contrast it with the public. It's not that there was this huge radiation leak that, incinerated everybody at the port or something. The idea was, yeah, it's possible the people working day in and day out next to these things might have a higher rate. And again, I don't know what the rate is. To say it's 9.2 times higher, that sounds unacceptable, but 9.2 times
right, exactly.
What?
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly.
Anyway, and so that's kind of, and also too, if it is, I would have liked to see the disaggregation to see how much is it if you're on a sub versus on an aircraft carrier, because maybe that, like I said, maybe that's the reason the Ronald Reagan did better than the whole population. Maybe it's the real issue was, on those subs, you're 100 meters away from the thing for 6 months at a time, whereas on a carrier you're not. And so the personnel who are just work day jobs, shifts at the modular reactor, they go home most of the time, and then, you get the idea.
Yeah, and even with these modular things, it's not like you got to go up and hug the thing for 4 hours a day. You're probably not going to hang out there too much.
The robots are going to take all our jobs anyway, so it's fine.
Relax. Part of the video that we didn't play, he was talking about a metric for describing energy density that's a little different from the one I heard. He was talking about land footprint per kilowatt hour or something like that, rather than, other things that I might have heard you talk about or Alex Epstein. So do you have any comment on that particular measure used, or pros, cons, indifferent?
Yeah. And again, partly, are we out of clips?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's partly.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yes. Yes. We're done.
You're not only keeping the folks at home guessing, you're keeping me guessing. Again, that was a great one. And just, there was only so much we could include. I also didn't want to be accused of ripping off the guy's material,
right?
Because he had some really cool graphics, folks, just showing the land use as atoms per kilowatt hour, and it's it's funny that the people who are, quote, real green, and they want, like, no, it takes up a lot of land that could have been used for something else. You're just coating it with solar panels. And obviously nuclear is much more efficient in that regard. The other thing, too, with the wind turbines is they just chop up birds and bugs.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to bring up. I'm no commie, but the thought of all those dead bugs and dead birds bothers the heck out of me. And here in Nevada, we've got at least two huge solar array, solar farms. Mm-hmm. And, they collect the sun rays, on the ground and then shine it up to these towers where it gets concentrated. And yeah, birds fly through those things and just get incinerated. You can see them dropping to earth like meteorites. It's horrific.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is the point where we could talk about, like, how would a libertarian society handle this kind of stuff?
Sure.
Yeah. So here in that novel Minerva, I had I got the small island, like in terms of geographic, land area, that ends up going ANCAP and gets a huge population density. And I, at the time, I thought, how are they going to get electricity? I thought it's clearly they're going to have nuclear. And I thought the thing that would make sense is to have it located offshore, right? So they have this offshore platform that's safe, and it's a distance away, so that if there were some kind of crazy disaster, that wouldn't just kill a bunch of people, but yet not so far away that they couldn't get the electricity in, right? So I think that's what the pattern you would see, that probably would be kind of risky to have a reactor like right on Wall Street or something. That seems kind of, unnecessarily risky. And I think, as with most things that I do in this genre, insurance companies. And I don't know what the answer is, right? And so, we're just spitballing here, and we're talking about various things. And with all this stuff too, there's various levels of protection. So like you're saying, Adam, you don't have to hug the thing, but even if you did, they could make walls that were even thicker, right? You can't, if you have to have it be on a nimble submarine, there's not too much you can do. But if it's just going to be this fixed thing where, and you can rotate the workers, and like I said, you can use robots eventually. And so there's all sorts of measures you can do in terms of reducing the risk. And how do you know what the right thing to do is? Well, that's what markets are really good at, is just manifesting the trade-offs and then letting people choose what they want. And so, it's
a price will be generated by the people weighing those pros and cons. Yeah.
Right. So somebody wants to build a power plant like that, and there's a nearby neighborhood. I think, they would have to sign standard contracts, just in, saying we will indemnify people if it can be proved in a reputable court, that uses standard principles of harm and restitution and so forth. Just, with judges that were informed on this area and understood the science behind it, and so you could understand what would it look like to make the claim. And then, go ahead, and if you need to get insurance companies willing to back you up, and then how much they would charge of the premiums. And then, if we had these other extra safeguards in place to show that even if there is a tsunami, we've got these 19 different things that would kick in, then your premiums would be lower, right? And so, or maybe you wouldn't. Maybe you just say, no, it's not worth it. Like that level of safety is too expensive, in which case they would roll the dice and just say, no, we'll pay the higher premiums for that, and just because that's the cheapest thing to do, and let's just hope it doesn't happen. Well, trade-offs. So there you go. I think that's how it would be handled. And Rob Bradley, by the way, I asked him long ago. He's the founder of the Institute for Energy Research. His doctoral dissertation was under Murray Rothbard, right? So the program Rob Bradley was in allowed you to have a chair who was like not at your school. And so, Rothbard was at UNLV at the time, and I forget where Rob actually was going to school, but they allowed him to have Rothbard be his chair. It's called Oil, Gas, and Government. The Cato Institute published it's like 2 volumes. It's this huge history of government intervention in the, crude oil and natural gas sectors. So Rob is a humongous fossil fuel guy, like very much in favor of it. But I asked him about nuclear, and that was his thing. He knew a lot of free market people reflexively just said, oh yeah, it's just stupid government regulations. But he said it's not obvious because of the you could argue it the other way, that the government, by granting permission for a plant to operate there, maybe that really is too risky.
Yeah.
And they're sort of just giving indemnity, kind of like what the people say about the vaccine stuff, and they just gave him permission. So anyway, he was just saying it's not obvious in terms of pure libertarian theory. If you say, should the landscape be full of nuclear reactors? He's saying it depends on how you handle the liability stuff. So
yeah, that's one of the goofiest and most destructive parts of this mixed economy is you can't really tell what's going on, or at least it's not obvious. What goods and ills are caused by the capitalist part, and what goods or ills are caused by the government part. Let me test my intuition against yours, because you know about energy more than me, but I think what we as a species need to do is keep burning fossil fuels as long as they are cheap and plentiful, because they are so energy dense and efficient, being mindful, of course, of pollution and such. And we need to switch to nuclear much more rapidly than we have been, as the video showed. We've been on a decades-long period of stagnation. I think there's a place for solar power in our future, maybe especially on top of houses or something for people who want to be totally off-grid. And that'll really become powerful once we get battery technology better and energy transmission better. But it's dumb to subsidize it. I think wind power is just ridiculous in almost all circumstances, unless you're milling wheat in Holland in the 1100s. And I don't have an opinion about hydro power. But yeah, so for my money, we keep burning fossil fuels because they're great. We turn into nuclear because they sure seem to be great, maybe even better. And somewhere in some capacity, solar probably has a future somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's largely correct. I think I agree with you. What's interesting is for those people who really believe we have to decarbonize, like within 10 years or else it's over, they should be the biggest proponents of nuclear power, because it's clear people are not going to accept cutting their standard of living in half. That's just not going to happen. They would, they just, you can say they're fools and whatever, and they're consigning their grandchildren to death, but okay, that's just not going to happen. And so nuclear would allow them to, if you had a crash course in it, maybe that's not the way they would sell it. Let's have a crash course in nuclear construction, that you conceivably could, get the world to rapidly decarbonize without suffering a huge hit to GDP and just general standard of living. And yet it's largely the same people who are totally against building one more nuclear plant and who say, yeah, we got to just do all wind and solar. And that, like you say, they're just ignoring reality. It's not going to work.
Yeah, we've been spending this whole time talking about the risks of radiation, and how to mitigate against them and what they really are, as opposed to our perceptions. But that little white mist that comes out of the top of even a typical nuclear reactor, the big ones, that's just water vapor.
Yeah.
There's all the things that environmentalists care about. These things don't contribute to any of it.
Right. And also, too, it was in the video that people might think that we're just ignoring. Well, what about the nuclear waste? I mean, yeah, there's ways you got to be careful. Don't just dump it in the drinking water, but you can deal with it. It's not in terms of volume that big of a thing. When I say it's not that big a deal, literally. So go put it somewhere and don't let 6-year-olds play near it, but that's
except for that one guy at the beginning. You can let him eat it.
Yeah. And you can put it, again, you can just run the numbers and say, yeah, okay, so we go and put it someplace where make sure people don't go there. All right. And it's not like, oh, well, after a while it would be this monolith that just takes up half the planet. No, it wouldn't.
No.
So
the sun will explode first.
So I think you're right. And yes, solar, it's funny. Because Krugman would always come in periodically and went back when we were doing Contra Krugman and just be a big booster of renewables and how don't listen to those Republicans and they'll tell you, but no, the future is renewable, and they just give statistics about all the cost savings and everything, and that's why we have to absolutely have the tax credit renewed to make sure that people still use this stuff. And so which is it, right? And it was funny when I was at IER, the Institute for Energy Research that Rob Bradley founded. One of the easiest things to do whenever it was the ITC and it's the PTC, the investment tax credit and production tax credit were, always related to these things because they had provisions in there for renewables. And it was just always easy. Like if I was going to go give a presentation or something, the best graphics to make the case that this is inefficient and doesn't pass the market test is I would go to the Wind Power Association's trade group, and I would get their PowerPoints or whatever, their infographics on their website about why it's so important to tell your legislator that, we need to renew this tax credit, and just showing how, if we got rid of this tax credit, the amount of new turbines brought to market would would just collapse overnight. And I was like, okay, so you guys are proving this is completely a creature of government subsidies, right? So anyway, so maybe that's a good thing, but the idea being that, this is just going to take, like the thing I used to say, I think I invented this one, was when we switched from horses to cars, it didn't take a manure tax, right? It was just people just switched over, right? So again, if it's this obvious thing, that's when people will switch to electric vehicles and so on, not because there's this massive carbon tax that the government imposes and forces everyone to do it. If it just makes sense, it will happen spontaneously, and then you don't have to force it.
You're a Christian, so maybe you can tell me, is there a specific demon whose job is it to get people to just really hate birds? 'Cause I can't understand these wind turbine people. Why do they hate birds so much?
Actually, I'm thinking that the Bohemian Grove thing, weren't there guys running around that had like bird masks on?
Owls.
Yeah. So maybe, that wouldn't make
different.
sense though. Maybe it's the owls taking. Maybe the owls aren't the ones getting. Maybe it's like they don't like the eagles, and this is the way they're striking back. I don't know.
You got his number. Call up Alex Jones and.
Yeah. Speaking of all this stuff, how do you feel? Because the way he presented it is, kind of like a Rush Limbaugh or somebody would just say, "Oh, these silly libs are just afraid of everything." But to me, it seemed more insidious. Like, doesn't it seem like there were a bunch of things that the U.S. was just such a powerhouse in the 60s, and all of these things just to completely destroy our morale, to make it so our electricity production gets stymied, and break up the family, get the races to hate each other and to doubt, do you get what I'm saying? Like all of these things of these commies and whoever, atheists, whatever
if you have
that,
if you are running around with that filter in your brain all the time, you can watch this guy's video and come away with another bunch of data points to validate that perspective. But I don't think that's real. I think there's enough honest reasons for people to have been afraid of nuclear. I mean, maybe there were cronies that were pushing in one particular direction or another, but I think it was mostly well-meaning but silly activists that were mostly behind it. And then Hollywood, it does whatever Hollywood does, and
that was
makes
was
a
it
makes
the
a Meryl
China
Streep
syndrome?
movie, and makes a Meryl Streep movie, and a bunch of other things, and 1,500 B movies about the toxic sludge destroyer from the second. Once the zeitgeist gets afraid of something, it just moves in that direction, on a whole bunch of different waves.
But, Alfred Hitchcock had the birds, and the resolution wasn't, oh, thank goodness the wind turbines chopped them all down, right?
I mean, that's what I literally got out of the credits. So how did you view that movie? I don't know. Well, you got any other bits of wisdom about nuclear?
Well, again, with all this stuff, it really is, like you say, government intervention, it gets you coming or going. You don't even know. And it's hard to say. And it's the same thing like with, I'll make an analogy, with the FDA. It's standard for libertarians to complain about, to bring a new drug to market, it costs $1 billion with a B, as in boy, and 10 years, and that's all true, but that doesn't land well with people who think big pharma is killing people and poisoning the food and whatever. And the flip side is also true. That it was like the Vioxx scandal. People go look at that. I mean, that was approved, and then it's arguably responsible for lots and lots of deaths. And it took a long time for the FDA to yank it because they didn't want to reverse the decision. It looks bad.
And that was like 20 years ago. That probably made an already a reluctant approver even more reluctant, right? Because look at all the bad press they got.
Yep. So anyway, I'm just saying it cuts both ways with the FDA, where they're reluctant to approve things that, a lot of, especially like desperate people who have tried all the conventions. If they got 6 months to live, somebody's got this new thing that might work, and the FDA says, no, you're not allowed to try it. That kind of stuff. But then again, it's the other way around too, where if the FDA approves something, people assume, well, it must be safe.
Yeah.
And so there's other things. And then it's not that, there's safeguards in place that occasionally the ones that do slip through that they really shouldn't have, they'll quickly correct. No, they won't. Whereas with a decentralized thing, like if there were different ratings agencies and one of them said, oh, yeah, go ahead, and something was really just a death trap or poison, whatever, and it didn't quickly correct that, people would stop subscribing to that one journal.
And you could look at their history of predictions and evaluations, and it would be a robust market. It's almost like freedom works better.
I think it does.
All right, folks, please go visit the Swan Brothers /cross and find out how all your merch needs might be satisfied. Thank you very much for this, Bob. I learned a lot. I hope everyone else did. And I'll catch you all next time.